I just can't talk to nobody new. I can't do that. So just sitting in the back, minding my own business. If there's somebody I know, maybe conversate with them. But other than that, yeah.
21-year-old Jordan VR, a pre-apprentice plumber and student, seeks to excel in his studies, keeping isolation away from his work and education. The enclosure of character becomes one of the first effects of isolation.
Yes, I would 100% say my routine is what's stopping me, altering me from ever joining a social group or even engaging in one, because, I'm a creature of habit. I just like doing something, the same thing over and over. I just don't get tired of it, So I think because of that, that's what's, limiting from any interaction with any social group. Just being a creature of habit, just doing what I like to do all the time, just day in and day out, really.
But what if isolation is not a preference? 18-year-old Ishan Nair, a soon-to-be college student, describes the lack of community around him as a factor that limits him from connecting with others.
Socially speaking, when I put myself in the perspective of other communities like the LGBT, for example, I can often find myself feeling isolated because there's just that lack of a pool of people in the area.
The lack of community is the resulting effect of the mass pool of Americans feeling loneliness. About half of the U.S. population reports feeling lonely, a statistic that must not be overlooked.
An American epidemic
poses a health risk just as deadly as smoking.
Isolation, a word commonly associated with the negative effects of mental illnesses and disorders, shadowing closely Generation Z. Dr. Melanis Rivera Rodriguez is a psychologist and assistant professor based out of Florida International University. She dives into the reasoning behind the disconnection of individual and community-based relationships.
Lonelier than ever by having access to these technologies, because it's an illusion, right? Like, we think about it from the psychological perspective as the idea that I'm symbolically connecting and talking to someone, but half of the interaction is missing. The possibility of engaging with someone face to face, being able to read their nonverbals, to be able to have aspects of physical touch, right? That are sometimes so important in feeling like we're connecting with people.
This disconnection becomes more apparent as both Jordan and Ishan differ in their perception of what community means to them. Generation Z, consisting of those between the ages of 14 to 26, often face a fully digital social environment, an adjustment that is one of the many scars left from adapting to the changes of the COVID-19 pandemic.
I don't like to spend so much time on my phone because I don't see it as a good way of, representing who you are. But then again, I'm also the person who sits in the back and just tries to, not to show their face or anything too. So that's the type of person I am.
The battle between online communication usage and seeking face-to-face connections creates space for many internal conflicts. 22-year-old Daniel Suarez, senior at Florida International University, views his relationship with isolation and loneliness as a period to grow and focus on the unrecoverable aspect of time.
When I like to be alone, I mean I like to be alone. Isolated in a way that is not bad, I believe. But more in a way that I can refresh my mind, think what I'm doing, who I am with, who I am spending my time, because your time, it's a valuable thing to protect.
U.S. Surgeon General Dr. Vivek Murthy has deeply emphasized the focus on device usage and the poor management skills that have led people to forget about quality connections in social environments.
The bottom line is, loneliness is extraordinarily common, and it does look like, particularly during the pandemic, that loneliness did increase for many groups. There are also trends that have been taking place for decades in our country where participation in the organizations that typically brought us together, like community-based organizations, bowling leagues, faith-based organizations, that participation has decreased a lot in the last 5 to 6 decades. And that's part of what has contributed to the loneliness that we're facing today.
The lack of participation in community-driven organizations has spread to the dynamic of educational and social spaces, shifting the idea of communication not only for Gen Z, but all generations.
So I think virtual is so much better because, at the end of the day, half of the time the students don't even bother showing their face on camera or talking to the professor. Most of it is just, listening and, yeah.
Online activity is a choice that has become a preference for many, a preference that has sustained social reliance on remote employment and connection post-COVID.
Online, they're very temporarily satisfying because it's like you're being relinquished of feeling otherwise just alone and detached from the rest of the world, which may seem different from you, because you're getting to talk to people that relate to you, that can see from your point of view, that can be in your shoes, and it's relieving in the moment.
Dr. Shedrick Boren, a social worker, healthcare executive, and a clinical assistant professor at Florida International University, has more than 30 years of experience working with vulnerable populations.
Instead of saying, I am depressed, you say, I'm a person with thoughts of depression. And so if I'm depressed, that's all you are, is depressed. But if you're a person with thoughts of depression, that can evolve. And so that to me gives the flexibility to become something not just rooted into, I am depressed, I am lonely, I'm never gonna go anywhere, but it's like, okay, I am lonely, I wanna meet people, but I don't have the skills, I'm afraid, I'm gonna be judged, I don't wanna put myself out there, I don't wanna be vulnerable. I mean, who wants rejection? Nobody wants rejection.
Those facing isolation in social settings commonly limit their opportunities, and oftentimes this leads to more serious mental illness. One being anxiety, a disorder that affects approximately 3 out of every 10 adolescents between ages 13 and 18. Struggling with mental health can limit expression even with those closest to us, increasing isolation and creating entry for other mental issues.
If I'll say this, I'll admit to it. I maybe took about 30 minutes before ever walking into that room with a bunch of people I don't even know. 30 minutes. Probably maybe a couple minutes after the meeting was about to end, because that just, all the signals went to my brain. My head started pulsing, my heart started beating fast, I started getting sweaty. Just like looking through the window of all the people in that room, I just couldn't get myself to go inside.
The smallest of interactions become the biggest of obstacles that often raise the walls of isolation.
I would not suggest that we wait, till people are adults and maybe this is causing an impairment, where isolation is now maybe causing mental health diagnoses, mental health disorders that require like a professional like me to come and intervene. But why aren't we providing parents with the right tools and skills so that they know what to look out for, right? And once again, the guidelines are there from the Academy of Pediatrics, but who's going to look at that?
Maybe more directly is, I don't think anybody's recognized the problem as seriously as they should about loneliness. So I don't think it's just a this generation thing. I just think this generation is so technologically advanced and coming to maturity in an era where the technology's keeping up with so many wonderful opportunities for them. I just think we need to make sure that we have those important things worked out so that it's not, let's become so super good at what we're doing that we just spend 90 hours on doing it instead of 40, and then go to bed. I mean, you need to have your sleep, you need to have your work, but you need to have your play, and you need to have your fun time, and you need to have your rest, and you need to have your exercise. It's a system. Everything needs to come together.
Focusing on the future, isolation must not be accepted as being new to our environments. Isolation has been around forever. It just so happens younger generations are now suffering from isolation at a greater scale. Change is necessary in order to overcome isolation, the epidemic.
For me, I don't think, maybe lowest is a dramatic word, but Because sometimes there is peace in isolation. I like being alone to just reflect on my own thoughts.
I don't see myself ever changing. Maybe down the road I have, somehow, eventually I had to get married, so I had to find a partner somehow. And then, but if that partner, I try my best to find somebody like me, likes to share a common interest, I guess, just being alone, just the two of us.
Here in this park, this was like my safe place when during quarantine. I used to come here and just bike, watch the sunset, and it was just a safe place for me.